Hello, dear viewers. We have another exciting prompt from our fearless leader. And this time we're supposed to talk about life-changing experiences, which is a big thing. Now, I've realized that a lot of my videos so far have been kind of heavy, so this time I wanted to tell you about something that changed my life in a positive way. This is the story of, as Kufarak puts it, I had my ass handed to me at paintball. So, as you may or may not know, all of us, les amis, more or less met online. And we got along pretty well, but at the point of this story, very few of us had actually met in person. I was meeting up with another group of friends at the time, and Kufarak happened to be part of it. Now, that day, we were going out for paintball. I didn't think too much of it at the time. I was excited to spend the afternoon with my friends. I mean, Kufarak and paintball, what's not to like about that? Except, didn't quite go as expected. Before I get into the story, what you need to know is that when I was growing up, I didn't see pacifism as much of a choice. I grew up in sort of a rough neighborhood. Don't get me wrong. It could have been much worse. There were no boarded up buildings, at least on my block. I never felt pressured to join a gang, but, when a police car sitting at the corner of your street feels more like scenery than actual help, you tend to be on the alert, and you learn really quickly how to defend yourself. I firmly believed that violent retaliation was the solution 99% of the time. I hated every minute of learning how to fight, and the first couple of fights that I found myself in, because I was a bit of a know-it-all, were incredibly terrifying. But after those first couple of fights, starting them got easier. Now, I got lucky. My parents managed to send me to a better school for high school. For the first time, I felt like I was being listened to by my teachers, and it felt safe to be curious. But the instincts I developed as a kid were still there, and they felt so out of place and dangerous compared to my peers who never had to protect themselves growing up like I did. I felt too powerful, and I desperately didn't want to, one could say, Hulk out. So I buried that anger and knowledge of self-defense in a way that ended up being pretty unhealthy. It wasn't until undergrad and meeting les amis that I started to reconcile aggression and peacefulness. Anyway, I didn't like shooting during paintball, and I especially didn't like the idea of shooting people. Even though it was only paint, it didn't feel right. Kuf noticed after a while, although it was pretty difficult not to notice. You see, I was sort of standing there like the proverbial deer in the headlights, completely covered in paint. She came over to me and asked me what was wrong. She has that ability to make you immediately feel comfortable. So we sat down and I told her what I just told you. It was a really interesting discussion that evolved, and of course it wasn't just about paintball. Now, earlier I said that Lesmi helped me with my potential for violence, and I think talking to Kufarak was one of those key moments. A lot of what we talked about that day was revolution. Now, Kufarak, if you don't know her, is incredibly knowledgeable about basically everything involving revolutionary history and overthrowing oppressors. Now, she believes that all revolutions require violence, and that overhauling a system is never achieved entirely peaceably. She doesn't like violence, but she also doesn't shy away from the concept. Orwell once made a great point about revolution and social change, and Kufarak fits Orwell's description of the revolutionary asking how you can change human nature before you have change in the system. The opposing viewpoint, being the moralist, asks how you can hope for any change in the system before bettering human nature. I think revolutions are points in the history of human nature where the suffering of the many becomes so great that all humanity cries out against the oppressor. But I also think that there's a second, more subtle kind of progress fueled by the inexorable march of time, In that same paragraph, Orwell also says, progress is not an illusion, it happens. Of course, he also followed that up with, but it is slow and invariably disappointing. I think that explains the differences between Courfeyrac and me pretty well. Progress happens, whether through revolution or the progress of time. Systems change and adapt. And if I had to choose, I would rather see the dawn than light the fire myself. But Courfeyrac also made a point that I hold very close to my heart. Since oppression is violence inflicted by an oppressor upon a group of people, sometimes their suffering becomes so great that it would be a crime to stand by and watch. If my violence has the potential to end another human being's suffering, that is the point where I should draw the line. I do hope that there will be no place for this in the times that we aim to shape. But realistically speaking, that time hasn't arrived yet. Anyway, we talked for a little bit more after that, too, about Gandhi and Game of Thrones. But eventually, someone found our neat little hideout and shot me in the back with this terrible neon pink paint. I finally felt comfortable picking up the gun because I didn't feel like I was trying to not Hulk out anymore. I mean, this was paintball, not a question of perpetuating violence. Turns out I'm a pretty good shot. Courfeyrac is better. I shot her maybe 3 times, and at that point I was incredibly soaked in paint, so it didn't really matter. Courfeyrac maybe did shoot me 5 times. I think she still has this photo just after the fight, and she's shrieking in horror because I'm trying to hug her and the paint on my body was still totally wet. Actually, it was a pretty amazing day for me. Anyway, I'm interested to see what everyone else's life-changing experiences were, and I will talk to you all soon.